The sound of her laughter cut through Jinwoo Park like a blade he never saw coming. He stood frozen in the doorway of Moonlight Cafe, his usually steady hands trembling as he watched Kira Thompson throw her head back, her rich, melodious laugh filling the small space. But it wasn't meant for him. It was for the man sitting across from her, a stranger with an easy smile and casual confidence that made Jinwoo's chest tighten with something he'd never experienced before. Jealousy. The most feared man in Los Angeles' underground world, the one who commanded respect with a single glance, felt his carefully constructed control cracking. For weeks, he'd found excuses to visit this little cafe in Koreatown, drawn by the warmth in Kira's dark eyes, and the way she remembered his order without him having to ask. She was the only person who looked at him and saw just a man, not the dangerous reputation that preceded him. Now, watching her genuine happiness with someone else, Jinwoo realized with startling clarity that somewhere between her first smile and this moment, she had become his. He just hadn't told her yet, and he didn't know how to handle that. 3 weeks earlier, Kira Thompson had been having the worst day of her life when the most beautiful man she'd ever seen walked into her cafe. She was behind the counter at Moonlight Cafe, her manager having just informed her that her hours were being cut again due to slow business. The small Korean-owned cafe in the heart of Los Angeles' Koreatown was struggling, and as the newest employee, she was the first to feel the impact. With rent due in 5 days and her savings account showing a devastating balance of $47, Kira was fighting back tears when the bell above the door chimed. The man who entered commanded attention without trying. Tall and lean with perfectly styled black hair, he wore an expensive charcoal suit that probably cost more than Kira made in 3 months. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath, dark, intense, and carrying a weight that suggested he'd seen things most people couldn't imagine. "Welcome to Moonlight Cafe," Kira managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "What can I get you?" He approached the counter with measured steps, his gaze never leaving her face. When he spoke, his voice was deep and controlled, with just a hint of an accent that made her pulse quicken. "Americano. Black." "Coming right up." Kira turned to the espresso machine, acutely aware of his presence behind her. She could feel him watching her every movement, and it should have made her nervous. Instead, it made her hyper-aware of herself in a way that was both thrilling and unsettling. As she prepared his drink, she snuck glances at him through the reflection in the machine's chrome surface. He stood perfectly still, hands clasped behind his back, posture rigid like a soldier at attention. Everything about him screamed power and control, yet there was something almost lonely in the way he held himself apart from the world. "Here you go," she said, sliding the cup across the counter. Their fingers brushed as he reached for it, and Kira felt an electric shock run up her arm. He paused, looking down at their touching hands before meeting her eyes again. "Thank you." "You're welcome, Mr." For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, almost reluctantly, he said, "Park. Jinwoo Park." "I'm Kira Thompson." She smiled, the first genuine smile she'd managed all day. "I haven't seen you here before. Are you new to the neighborhood?" Something flickered in his dark eyes. Surprise, maybe, that she was making conversation. "I work nearby." "What do you do?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He studied her face as if trying to determine whether she was genuinely curious or fishing for information. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him because his shoulders relaxed slightly. "Import and export," he said finally. "International business." Kira nodded, though something in his tone suggested there was more to it than that. "That sounds interesting. Do you travel a lot?" "Sometimes." He took a sip of his coffee, and she was pleased to see his expression soften with approval. "This is excellent. Thank you. I actually learned to make coffee from my grandmother. She worked at a cafe in Atlanta for 30 years before she retired." Kira found herself sharing more than she usually did with customers, but there was something about Jinwoo that made her want to fill the silence. She always said that making good coffee was about understanding what people needed, not just what they ordered. "And what do you think I need?" The question came out more intimate than he'd probably intended, and Kira saw him tense as if he wanted to take it back. She tilted her head, studying him with the same intensity he'd been directing at her. "Peace," she said softly. You look like someone who carries the weight of the world on his shoulders. Jin-woo went very still. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other across the counter, and Kira felt something shift in the air between them, a recognition, perhaps, or an understanding that neither of them had expected. "I should go," he said abruptly, pulling out his wallet. He placed a $20 bill on the counter for a $4 coffee and turned to leave. "Wait!" Kira called after him. "Your change." "Keep it." He paused at the door, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't read. "Thank you for the coffee, Kira Thompson." After he left, Kira stood staring at the door for several minutes, her heart racing for reasons she couldn't explain. She'd served hundreds of customers since starting at Moonlight Cafe, but none had affected her like Jin-woo Park. There was something about him, a dangerous magnetism wrapped in perfect politeness, that made her want to know more. Her manager, Mrs. Kim, emerged from the back office with a concerned expression. "Kira, who was that man?" "A customer." "Why?" Mrs. Kim looked troubled. "I saw him through the window. He looked familiar, but I cannot remember where I have seen him before." She shook her head. "Be careful, child. Some men in this neighborhood, they are not what they seem." Kira wanted to ask what she meant, but Mrs. Kim had already retreated to her office, leaving Kira alone with her thoughts and the lingering scent of expensive cologne. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of routine tasks, but Kira found her mind returning again and again to Jin-woo Park. The way he'd looked at her, as if she were a puzzle he was trying to solve. The careful control in his voice, like he was used to choosing his words with precision. The loneliness she'd glimpsed beneath his polished exterior. And the way her body had responded to his presence, the quickened pulse, the heightened awareness, the inexplicable feeling that something important had just happened. As she closed the cafe that evening, Kira caught herself hoping he would come back. She told herself it was just curiosity, that she was simply intrigued by the mystery he represented, but deep down, she knew it was more than that. Jin-woo Park had walked into her cafe for less than 10 minutes, and somehow he'd managed to turn her world upside down. Standing alone in the empty cafe, surrounded by the familiar scents of coffee and pastries, Kira couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a turn towards something she wasn't prepared for, something that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself and the safe, predictable world she'd built. Outside, the neon lights of Koreatown flickered to life, casting colorful shadows through the cafe windows. Somewhere out there, Jin-woo Park was returning to whatever world he came from, a world that felt as distant from hers as the stars. But as Kira locked up and headed home to her tiny studio apartment, she carried with her the memory of dark eyes that had seen too much, and the strange certainty that this was only the beginning. Jin-woo Park had built his empire on control, precision, and the ability to read people within seconds of meeting them. In his world, a world of shadows, unspoken threats, and carefully negotiated power, survival depended on understanding everyone's angle, their weakness, their price. So why couldn't he figure out Kira Thompson? For the past week, he'd found himself returning to Moonlight Cafe every morning, telling himself it was simply convenient. His legitimate import business had an office 3 blocks away, and the coffee was genuinely excellent. It had nothing to do with the way Kira's face lit up when she saw him, or how she remembered his order without him having to ask, or the way she treated him like he was just another customer, instead of someone whose name was whispered in fear throughout the city's underground. "The usual, Mr. Park?" she asked as he approached the counter, her warm smile making something in his chest tighten. "Please." He watched her move with practiced efficiency, noting how she'd learned to prepare his Americano exactly the way he preferred it, strong enough to strip paint black as his reputation. "How are you today, Miss Thompson?" "Better now," she said, then seemed to realize how that sounded. A faint blush colored her cheeks as she focused intently on the espresso machine. "I mean, it's been a good morning. Mrs. Kim finally got the new shipment of pastries from the Korean bakery, and they're incredible. You should try the red bean croissant." Jin-woo found himself genuinely considering it, which was absurd. He had a meeting with the heads of 3 rival organizations in an hour, where he'd been negotiating territory disputes that could turn violent with the wrong word. The last thing he should be thinking about was pastries. "Perhaps tomorrow," he said, accepting his coffee. Their fingers brushed again. They always did. and he was beginning to suspect it wasn't entirely accidental on her part. "I'll save you one," Kira promised, and the simple offer hit him with unexpected force. When was the last time someone had saved anything for him? When was the last time someone had thought of him when he wasn't there? "Kira ya," Mrs. Kim called from behind the counter, speaking in rapid Korean. Jin Woo's expression didn't change, but he understood every word. "The delivery truck is here. Help me with the inventory." "Coming, Mrs. Kim," Kira replied in perfect Korean, causing Jin Woo to pause with his coffee halfway to his lips. "You speak Korean," he said, and it wasn't a question. Kira nodded, looking slightly embarrassed. "I majored in East Asian Studies at UCLA, Korean language and literature. I'm actually fluent in Korean, Japanese, and Mandarin." She shrugged as if this impressive accomplishment was nothing. "Turns out there's not a huge job market for that skill set, which is why I'm here instead of using my degree." Jin Woo stared at her, his mind racing. In his world, information was currency, and the ability to understand multiple languages was invaluable. She was brilliant, educated, and working as a barista because life hadn't given her better options. The waste of her potential bothered him more than it should have. "Your Korean is excellent," he said carefully. "Where did you learn to speak it so naturally?" "I spent a semester abroad in Seoul during college, lived with a host family in Gangnam." Kira's eyes took on a distant look. "It was the best 4 months of my life. The culture, the food, the people. Everything about it felt like home in a way that nowhere else ever has." Something shifted in Jin Woo's chest. She understood his culture, had lived in his homeland, spoke his language with genuine affection. It explained the subtle ways she'd been respectful during their interactions. The slight bow when she handed him his coffee, the way she used both hands when accepting his payment. Small gestures that most Americans wouldn't think to make. "Why did you come back?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Student visa expired," she said with a rueful smile, "and my grandmother got sick. I couldn't leave her alone." The sadness in her voice was brief but unmistakable. "She passed away 6 months ago. That's actually why I moved to LA. I needed a fresh start, and I thought maybe I could find work here that would use my language skills." "I'm sorry for your loss," Jin Woo said, and meant it. Family loyalty was something he understood completely. "Thank you." Kira's smile was soft and grateful. She would have loved this place. She always said the best way to understand people was through their food and their stories. Before Jin Woo could respond, the bell above the door chimed, and 3 men in expensive suits entered. Jin Woo recognized them immediately, Dmitry Volkov and his lieutenants, part of the Russian organization that controlled the docks. Their presence here wasn't coincidental. "Jin Woo," Dmitry called out in accented English, his voice carrying the kind of false friendliness that preceded violence. "What a surprise to find you here." Jin Woo turned slowly, his posture shifting into something more dangerous. The casual customer disappeared, replaced by the man who commanded fear and respect in equal measure. "Dmitry, gentlemen." Kira looked between them, clearly sensing the tension that had suddenly filled the small cafe. Mrs. Kim had emerged from the back room and gone very still, her face pale with recognition and fear. "We were hoping to have a word," Dmitry continued, his eyes flicking to Kira with interest. "Perhaps somewhere more private." "I'm afraid I'm busy," Jin Woo replied, his voice carrying a warning that made Dmitry's men shift nervously. Of course, business first." Dmitry's smile was predatory. "But surely you have time for coffee with old friends. Miss, 3 espressos, please." Kira looked to Jin Woo, clearly picking up on the undercurrent she didn't understand. He gave her an almost imperceptible nod, and she began preparing the drinks with hands that trembled slightly. "Beautiful girl, sir," Dmitry commented, watching Kira work. "Very exotic. I can see why you've been spending so much time here." The temperature in the cafe seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jin Woo's eyes went completely cold, and when he spoke, his voice carried the kind of quiet menace that had ended wars. "Choose your next words very carefully, Dmitry." The Russian's smile faltered. He'd clearly intended to provoke Jin Woo, but the reaction was more intense than he'd expected. "No offense intended, my friend. Simply an observation." Kira approached with the espressos, her professional smile firmly in place despite the obvious tension. "Here you go, gentlemen. Is there anything else I can get you?" "Actually," Dmitri said, pulling out a business card. "We're always looking for talented young women in our entertainment ventures. Someone with your beauty could make excellent money." The card never made it to Kira's hand. Jinwoo's arm shot out, catching Dmitri's wrist in a grip that made the bigger man wince. "The lady is not interested," Jinwoo said quietly, his accent becoming more pronounced as his control slipped. "And neither am I in continuing this conversation." For a moment, the cafe was silent except for the hum of the espresso machine. Then Dmitri pulled his hand back, rubbing his wrist. "Of course, my mistake." He dropped money on the counter and gestured to his men. "We should be going. Jinwoo, we'll speak again soon." After they left, the cafe felt like a bomb had just been defused. Mrs. Kim disappeared into the back room, muttering prayers in Korean. Kira stood behind the counter, her dark eyes wide with questions she didn't know how to ask. "Are you all right?" Jinwoo asked, his voice gentle again. "I'm fine," she said, though her hands were still shaking slightly. "Who were those men?" Jinwoo looked at her for a long moment, weighing his options. He could lie, deflect, disappear from her life before she got pulled into his world. It would be the smart thing to do, the safe thing. Instead, he found himself saying, "No one you need to worry about." "But Kira—" He paused, meeting her eyes. "Be careful, walking alone at night. This neighborhood can be dangerous." She nodded, still watching him with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see straight through his carefully constructed facades. "Thank you," she said softly, "for whatever just happened." Jinwoo left without another word, but as he walked away he made a decision that would change everything. Kira Thompson was under his protection now, whether she knew it or not, and anyone who threatened her would learn exactly why Jinwoo Park was the most feared man in Los Angeles. 2 days after the incident with Dimitri's men, Kira was closing the cafe alone when she noticed the black sedan parked across the street. It had been there for over an hour, its tinted windows making it impossible to see who was inside, but she could feel eyes watching her every movement. Mrs. Kim had left early for a doctor's appointment, trusting Kira to handle the evening routine. As she wiped down tables and stacked chairs, Kira tried to ignore the growing unease in her stomach. The cafe's usual evening customers had already left, and the street outside was quieter than usual. She was reaching for the light switch when the bell above the door chimed. Kira spun around, her heart leaping into her throat, expecting to see Dmitri or one of his men. Instead, Jinwoo Park stood in the doorway, his dark eyes scanning the empty cafe before settling on her face. "We're closed," she said, then immediately felt foolish. "I mean, I know." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him and turning the lock. "I saw the car outside." So he'd noticed it too. Kira felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Do you know who they are?" "Associates of the men from the other day." Jinwoo moved through the cafe with predatory grace, checking the windows and back exit, with the thoroughness of someone accustomed to potential threats. "They're watching you." "Why?" The question came out smaller than she'd intended. Jinwoo paused in his inspection, his jaw tightening. "Because they think you matter to me." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them was ready to address. Kira felt her pulse quicken, but not from fear this time. "Do I?" she asked quietly. "Matter to you?" For a moment, Jinwoo's carefully controlled expression cracked, revealing something raw and vulnerable underneath. "You shouldn't," he said, his voice rough. "It's dangerous for you if you do." "But I do." It wasn't a question, and they both knew it. The tension that had been building between them for weeks finally had a name, and it terrified them both. "Kira." Jinwoo stepped closer, and she could see the internal war playing out in his dark eyes. "You don't understand what you're saying. You don't know who I am." "Then tell me." She moved toward him, drawn by the magnetic pull she'd felt since the first day they'd met. "I know you're not just an import businessman. I know those men the other day were afraid of you. I know you carry yourself like someone who's used to being in charge of life and death situations." Jinwoo went very still. "And that doesn't frighten you?" "It should," Kira admitted, stopping just inches away from him. "But when I look at you, I don't see someone dangerous. I see someone who's been hurt, someone who's had to become hard to survive. I see someone who's been alone for too long." "You see too much," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe. Or maybe I see exactly what you need me to see." The space between them seemed to crackle with electricity. Jin Woo raised his hand slowly, as if giving her time to pull away, and gently cupped her cheek. His thumb traced across her skin with reverent care. "I've killed people, Kira," he said, his voice steady despite the confession. "I've made decisions that destroyed lives. I'm not a good man." "I don't believe that," she replied, leaning into his touch. "A truly bad man wouldn't warn me about danger. He wouldn't protect a stranger. He wouldn't look at me the way you do. How do I look at you? Like I'm something precious, something worth protecting." Kira's voice was soft but certain. "Like I'm the first good thing you've seen in a long time." Jin Woo's control finally shattered. He pulled her against him, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was desperate and gentle at the same time. Kira melted into him, her hands fisting in his expensive shirt as she kissed him back with equal fervor. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Jin Woo rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if he was memorizing the moment. "This is insane," he murmured. "I should walk away. I should disappear from your life before—" "Before what?" Kira interrupted. "Before I fall for you completely? Too late." His eyes snapped open, searching her face. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." Kira's voice was steady, sure. "I know this is crazy. I know we've only known each other for a few weeks. I know you're involved in something dangerous that I don't understand, but I also know that when you're not here, I spend all day waiting for you to walk through that door. I know that when you look at me, I feel like the most important person in the world, and I know that whatever this is between us, it's real." Jin Woo stared at her for a long moment, his expression cycling through disbelief, fear, and something that looked dangerously close to hope. "If we do this," he said finally, "if we cross this line, there's no going back. My world will become your world, and that means danger you can't imagine." "Then protect me," Kira said simply. "Teach me what I need to know, but don't ask me to pretend I don't feel this." Before Jin Woo could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression immediately hardened. "What is it?" Kira asked. "Dimitri's men are moving." Jin Woo was already reaching for his own phone, typing rapidly. "They're not just watching anymore." As if summoned by his words, the sound of car doors slamming echoed from the street outside. Jin Woo moved to the window, peering through the blinds. 3 men, armed. His voice had shifted into something cold and professional. "They're coming to the front door." Kira felt ice flood her veins. "What do they want?" "You." Jin Woo turned to her, his face grim. "They want to use you to get to me. I don't understand." "There's no time to explain." Jin Woo grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the back of the cafe. "Is there another way out?" "The alley behind the building, but show me." They moved quickly through the cafe's back room, Kira's mind racing with questions she didn't have time to ask. As they reached the rear exit, Jin Woo paused, pulling out his phone again. "Yuki, I need extraction at Moonlight Cafe. 3 hostiles, armed. Bring backup." He ended the call and looked at Kira. "My people will be here in 5 minutes. Until then, we run." "Jin Woo, what's happening? Why are they—" The front door of the cafe exploded inward with a crash that made them both freeze. Heavy footsteps echoed through the main room, followed by voices speaking in Russian. "Because," Jin Woo said, his voice deadly quiet as he pulled her toward the alley, "they know that the one way to destroy me is to take away the only thing I've ever cared about." The confession hit Kira like a physical blow, but there was no time to process it. Jin Woo pushed open the back door, scanning the alley for threats before pulling her outside. "Stay close to me," he ordered, his hand finding hers. "Whatever happens, don't let go." As they ran through the dark alley, Kira realized that her life as she knew it was over. She was no longer just a barista struggling to make ends meet. She was now the weakness of the most dangerous man in Los Angeles. And somehow, despite the terror coursing through her veins, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Behind them, shouts erupted from the cafe as their pursuers discovered they were gone. Jin Woo squeezed her hand tighter, and Kira squeezed back. Holding on to the only certainty she had left, whatever came next, they would face it together. The safe house was nothing like what Kira had expected. Instead of the stark industrial space she'd imagined, Jin Woo had brought her to an elegant penthouse apartment overlooking downtown Los Angeles. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city lights, while expensive artwork adorned the walls and plush furniture filled the open living space. "This is where you live?" Kira asked, still catching her breath from their escape through the back alleys of Koreatown. "One of several places," Jin Woo replied, securing multiple locks on the door behind them. "This one is clean. No one knows about it except my most trusted people." Kira watched him move through the space with practiced efficiency, checking windows and activating what appeared to be a sophisticated security system. The casual customer from the cafe was completely gone, replaced by someone who moved like a predator in his natural habitat. "Jin Woo," she said softly, "I need you to tell me the truth, all of it." He paused in his security check, his shoulders tensing. For a moment she thought he might deflect again, give her another half-truth wrapped in protection. Instead, he turned to face her, and she saw the exact moment he made the decision to trust her completely. "My name is Jin Woo Park, and I'm the head of the largest Korean-American organized crime family on the West Coast," he said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the confession. "What you would call the Korean Mafia, though we prefer to think of ourselves as a traditional organization that protects our community's interests." Kira felt the words hit her like physical blows, but she forced herself to remain still to listen. "My father built this organization from nothing when he immigrated here 30 years ago," Jin Woo continued. "He started with a small protection service for Korean businesses that were being targeted by other gangs. It grew from there, legitimate businesses mixed with less legitimate ones. Import and export, yes, but not always legal goods. Territory protection, conflict resolution that doesn't involve the police. And when your father died, you took over," Kira said quietly. 5 years ago, I was 28 and had been groomed for it my entire life." Jin Woo's expression was carefully neutral, but she could see the weight of those years in his eyes. "I've tried to move us toward more legitimate operations, but change is slow in this world. There are still aspects of the business that require decisive action. The men you said you'd killed, rivals who threatened our people, traitors within our own organization, men who hurt innocent people under our protection." His voice remained steady, but she could see the toll those decisions had taken on him. "I don't kill for pleasure, Kira. I kill when there's no other choice, when it's the only way to protect the people who depend on me." Kira absorbed this information, her mind racing. Everything made sense now. His commanding presence, the way other men deferred to him, the expensive clothes and cars, the careful way he spoke as if every word carried weight. "And Dmitri's people?" she asked. "The Russians have been trying to expand into our territory for months. They see the Korean community as weak, easy to exploit." Jin Woo's jaw tightened. "They're wrong, but they won't learn that through negotiation. So they're using me to get to you. They think you're my weakness." Jin Woo's eyes met hers, and she saw something vulnerable there. "They're not wrong." The admission hung between them, heavy with implication. Kira felt her heart racing, but not from fear this time. "How long have you known?" she asked. "That you felt something for me?" "The first day," he said simply. "You looked at me like I was just a man, not a title or a reputation. You smiled at me like I was someone worth smiling at. I've been trying to stay away from you ever since." "Not very successfully." "No," he admitted with a rueful smile. "Not very successfully." Kira moved closer to him, drawn by the honesty in his voice. "What happens now? Now we wait for this to blow over. Dmitri will realize that taking you was a mistake and he'll back down." Jin Woo's voice carried a confidence that didn't quite reach his eyes. "My people are already moving against his operations. By tomorrow, he'll have bigger problems than trying to use you against me." "And after that? After that?" Jin Woo hesitated, and Kira could see him wrestling with something. "After that, you go back to your life. You're safe, and we pretend this never happened." "Is that what you want?" "It's what's best for you." "That's not what I asked." Kira stepped closer, close enough to see the conflict in his dark eyes. "Is that what you want, Jin Woo?" For a moment, his carefully maintained control cracked completely. "What I want is impossible," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I want to wake up every morning knowing you're safe. I want to come home to you at the end of every day. I want to build a life with you that doesn't involve looking over our shoulders or wondering if today is the day my enemies decide to hurt you to get to me. Maybe it doesn't have to be impossible. Kira, he reached for her, then stopped himself. You don't understand what you'd be giving up. A normal life, a safe life, children who could grow up without bodyguards, a husband who comes home every night instead of disappearing for days on business you can't know about. And what would I be gaining? The question seemed to surprise him. What do you mean? You're telling me everything I'd be giving up, Kira said, moving close enough to touch him. What would I be gaining if I chose this life with you? Jin-Woo stared at her, his expression cycling through disbelief and hope. You'd be gaining a man who would die before letting anyone hurt you, someone who would give you everything he has, everything he is. A love that would consume everything else, because you'd become the most important thing in his world. That sounds like a fair trade to me. Before he could respond, his phone rang. Jin-Woo answered it immediately, his expression growing grim as he listened. What is it? Kira asked when he ended the call. Dimitri's people hit 3 of our businesses tonight, Jin-Woo said, his voice cold with fury. They're escalating this beyond what I expected. What does that mean? It means they're not backing down. Jin-Woo was already moving toward what appeared to be a hidden panel in the wall. When he opened it, Kira saw an arsenal of weapons that made her stomach clench. It means this is about to become a war. Jin-Woo, I have to go, he said, selecting a gun and checking its ammunition with practiced efficiency. Yuki will be here in 10 minutes to watch over you. Don't leave this apartment. Don't answer the door for anyone except him. Where are you going? To end this. The look in his eyes was unlike anything she'd seen before. Cold, deadly, absolutely certain. This was the man his enemies feared, the one who had built an empire on decisive action and unwavering resolve. Don't, Kira said, grabbing his arm. Don't go. There has to be another way. There is no other way, Jin-Woo said, his voice gentle despite the steel in his eyes. They threatened you, Kira. They came into your workplace, your safe space, and they threatened you. That's a line no one crosses. I don't want you to kill people because of me. I'm not killing people because of you, he said, cupping her face in his hands. I'm killing people who threatened the woman I love. The words hit Kira like lightning. Before she could respond, Jin-Woo kissed her fiercely, desperately, like a man going to war who wasn't sure he'd come back. When he pulled away, his eyes were dark with promise and threat in equal measure. When I come back, he said, we're going to finish this conversation, and you're going to tell me if you're brave enough to love a man like me. Then he was gone, leaving Kira alone in the elegant apartment with the taste of his kiss on her lips and the terrifying certainty that everything was about to change forever. Kira spent the longest night of her life pacing Jin-Woo's penthouse, watching the city lights blur through tears she refused to let fall. Yuki, Jin-Woo's lieutenant, stood guard by the windows, a silent, intimidating presence who spoke only to assure her that his boss would return safely. But as dawn broke over Los Angeles with no word from Jin-Woo, Kira began to fear the worst. She was standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, when she heard the locks turning. Her heart leaped as the door opened, but instead of Jin-Woo, 3 men in expensive suits entered the apartment. Dmitri Volkov smiled at her with predatory satisfaction. Miss Thompson, how lovely to see you again. Yuki was already reaching for his weapon, but Dmitri's men were faster. The sound of gunfire echoed through the apartment, and Yuki collapsed to the floor, clutching his shoulder. Now, Dmitri said, stepping over the wounded man. No need for violence. We're all civilized people here. What do you want? Kira demanded, forcing her voice to remain steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. What I've always wanted, Dmitri replied, settling into one of Jin-Woo's expensive chairs as if he owned the place. Jin-Woo Park's complete surrender, his territory, his operations, his organization, everything. He'll never give you that. Oh, but he will. Dmitri's smile was cold and confident. Because if he doesn't, I'm going to kill the only thing in this world that matters to him. Kira felt ice flood her veins, but she lifted her chin defiantly. You're making a mistake. I'm nobody special, just a barista who served him coffee. Please, Dmitri laughed. Do you think I'm stupid? Jinwoo Park has never shown interest in a woman before, never allowed anyone close enough to matter. But you he protects, you he risks everything for. You are his weakness, and that makes you very valuable indeed. Before Kira could respond, Dimitri's phone rang. He answered it with obvious satisfaction. Jinwoo, how good of you to call. Yes, I have her. Yes, she's unharmed, for now. Dimitri's eyes never left Kira's face. You know what I want. Complete surrender, or she dies. You have 1 hour to decide. He ended the call and pocketed the phone. He's coming, of course, the great Jinwoo Park, reduced to begging for the life of a barista. How the mighty fall. You don't know him at all, Kira said quietly. If you did, you'd know that threatening me was the worst mistake of your life. Dimitri's smile faltered slightly. Big words for someone in your position. I'm not afraid of you, Kira lied, surprised to find that it was almost true. And when Jinwoo gets here, you're going to learn why everyone in this city fears him. 45 minutes later, the apartment's security system chimed, indicating someone was in the elevator. Dimitri's men took positions by the door, weapons drawn, while Dimitri himself grabbed Kira and pressed a gun to her temple. Remember, he told his men, we need him alive. He's no good to us dead. The elevator opened, and Jinwoo stepped out alone, his hands raised to show he was unarmed. But everything about his posture, his expression, the cold fury in his dark eyes, screamed danger. Let her go, Dimitri, he said, his voice deadly calm. This is between us. How touching, Dimitri sneered, pressing the gun harder against Kira's head. The great Jinwoo Park brought to his knees by love. Your father would be ashamed. My father would understand, Jinwoo replied, his eyes never leaving Kira's face. Family is everything, and she is my family now. Family? Dimitri laughed. You've known her for a few weeks. This isn't love, it's obsession. You're wrong, Kira said, finding her voice despite the gun at her temple. It is love, and that's why you've already lost. Shut up, Dimitri snarled, but Kira continued speaking, her eyes locked on Jinwoo's. I love you, she said, the words carrying across the apartment with perfect clarity. I love your strength and your vulnerability. I love how you protect people who can't protect themselves. I love that you see me as someone worth saving, and I love you enough to trust that you have a plan to get us out of this. Jinwoo's expression softened for just a moment, and he mouthed 3 words. Trust me, Sarang. Sarang, love. The Korean endearment hit Kira's heart like an arrow, and she nodded almost imperceptibly. How very touching, Dimitri said. Now, about my terms. He never finished the sentence. The apartment's lights suddenly went out, plunging them into darkness. In the chaos that followed, Kira felt Dimitri's grip loosen as he tried to orient himself. She threw herself sideways, rolling away from him, just as gunfire erupted throughout the apartment. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in an eerie red glow. When the shooting stopped, Dimitri's men were on the ground and Jinwoo stood over Dimitri himself, a gun pressed to the Russian's forehead. You made one critical mistake, Jinwoo said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet menace that had built his reputation. You threatened what's mine. The Korean Mafia boss saw the black girl laughing with someone else and didn't know how to feel. Dimitri gasped, blood trickling from his mouth. That's what started all this, wasn't it? Your jealousy over a woman. No, Jinwoo replied, his finger tightening on the trigger. What started this was your failure to understand that some things are worth more than territory or money or power. Some things are worth everything. The gunshot echoed through the apartment with finality. When the smoke cleared and Jinwoo's backup team had secured the scene, Kira found herself in Jinwoo's arms, both of them shaking with relief and adrenaline. Are you hurt? He asked, his hands roaming over her face and arms, checking for injuries. I'm fine, she assured him, then pulled back to look at him seriously. But we need to talk. About what? About the fact that I just told you I love you in the middle of a hostage situation, and you haven't said it back. Despite everything they'd just been through, Jinwoo laughed, a sound of pure joy that transformed his entire face. Sarang Hae, Kira Thompson, he said, cupping her face in his hands. I love you more than my own life, more than my organization, my reputation, my empire. You are everything to me. even though loving me almost got you killed. Especially because of that, Jinwoo said, his voice serious again. Love that doesn't involve risk isn't really love at all. It's just convenience. Kira kissed him then, pouring all of her fear and relief and love into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Do I go back to making coffee and pretending this never happened?" "Now," Jinwoo said, his eyes bright with possibility, "you decide if you're brave enough to build a life with the most dangerous man in Los Angeles." "I think I can handle it," Kira said, smiling up at him. "After all, I've already survived my first Mafia war. How much harder can the rest be?" Jinwoo's answering smile was full of promise and challenge in equal measure. "We'll find out together, Sarang. We'll find out together." As the sun rose fully over Los Angeles, painting the penthouse in golden light, Kira realized that her life as a struggling barista was truly over. But what was beginning, a love story that had survived bullets and threats and the weight of an entire criminal empire, was worth every risk they'd taken to find it. Some love stories begin with coffee and conversation. Theirs had been forged in fire and blood and the absolute certainty that some things are worth fighting for. And they were just getting started, years later. The new Moonlight Cafe was 3 times the size of the original, with gleaming espresso machines and a view of the Pacific Ocean that took customers' breath away. It had become the crown jewel of Jinwoo's legitimate business empire, a chain of Korean fusion cafes that stretched from Los Angeles to San Francisco. But this one, the flagship location in Santa Monica, was special. This was where it all began. Kira stood behind the counter, her wedding ring catching the morning light as she prepared an Americano, black, no sugar, exactly the way her husband liked it. The cafe was busy with the morning rush, but she always made time for this particular customer. "The usual, Mr. Park?" she asked with a smile that still made his heart race after all these years. "Please, Mrs. Park," Jinwoo replied, his eyes warm with the kind of love that had only deepened with time. Their life together had been everything he'd promised and more. The transition from his old world to a completely legitimate business empire had taken years. But they'd built something beautiful together, a chain of successful cafes, a foundation that helped Korean immigrants start their own businesses, and a love that had weathered every storm. "Daddy, can I have hot chocolate?" A small voice piped up from beside Jinwoo. Kira looked down at their 5-year-old daughter, May, whose dark eyes were a perfect blend of her parents' heritage. "Of course, baby girl. Extra marshmallows. Yes, please." As Kira prepared their drinks, she caught Jinwoo watching her with that same intense gaze he'd had the first day they met. Some things never changed. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, sliding their drinks across the counter. "Just remembering the day a beautiful barista looked at the most dangerous man in Los Angeles and decided he was worth saving," Jinwoo said, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips. "Best decision I ever made," Kira replied, squeezing his fingers. "The best decision we ever made," he corrected, pulling her close for a kiss that tasted like coffee and promises kept. Outside, the Pacific Ocean sparkled in the California sunshine, and their daughter's laughter filled the air with joy. They had built something extraordinary from the ashes of his old life, a love story that proved some risks are worth taking, some people are worth fighting for, and some happy endings are worth waiting for. Their story had begun with coffee and danger, jealousy and protection, secrets and revelations, but it had become something neither of them had dared to dream of, a love that conquered everything, a family that made every sacrifice worthwhile, and a future that stretched out before them bright with possibility. Some love stories are written in the stars. Theirs had been written in coffee grounds and courage, in the space between fear and faith, in the moment when 2 people decided that love was worth any risk. And it was only the beginning.